A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Dosanjh. Thank you for joining in on CNN News 18. Let me introduce you to our viewers. Mr. Dosanjh was the first person of color to become the Premier of British Columbia. You were also a member of the Parliament from the Liberal Party of Canada and Canada's former Health Minister as well. Many thanks to you, Mr. Dosanjh, for joining in. Now, today, India's External Affairs Ministry has stated that the visa application process has been paused because India's High Commission and consulates in Canada have been facing security threats that have impacted their day-to-day working. In your experience over the years, are Indo-Canadian relations at the moment at their lowest point?
Well, they absolutely are at the lowest point. They were quite low at the time of the nuclear test India had done way back some decades ago. In fact, then when I became the premier, I was invited on a state visit by the Prime Minister Vajpayee. And I think that was the first time the Canadian High Commissioner was able to see anyone in Indian government for years, first time in years, because the High Commissioner went with me and actually told me. So I think that right now they're actually at the lowest ever, and I don't foresee any change anytime soon. I think that there is. We can sort of get into allegations and counter allegations. It's not helpful, but in the current situation, the government of India, I think, somewhat legitimately doesn't trust Mr. Trudeau.
Right.
He has seen to be very close to Khalistanis, and he's seen to. I know that he has had many Khalistani supporters and advisors around him.
And that's what I'm going to get into now. The Canadian Prime Minister's allegation of India's involvement in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, this without the Canadian police or RCMP as it's known, did not even complete its investigations. And that, of course, has been viewed as absurd and motivated by India, also as a knee-jerk reaction by several foreign policy analysts. I'd like your thoughts.
Well, I think that I take a somewhat different view of that. If he has credible evidence to suggest that there was India's hand in it, then I think he has an obligation to do something about it. How you go about doing that is a different matter. If you raise it to the level of a statement in Parliament, you stand up on the first day when the Parliament is back in session, and you stand up and accuse another country, then I think it becomes more difficult unless you have some evidence to back it up with.
And back it up with credible evidence, because what he did in the Parliament had no evidence.
I think many Canadians are asking the same question in the sense, where's the beef? We used to say, in old times, where's the goods? And I think that if he has evidence, I must say that I never believed India would do something like this. But, I was listening to the former RAW chief, Dulat, in an interview where he said, this is not India's policy. India has never done that in the past. But countries change. I mean, Mr. Modi is macho Modi, as you know. I have to say that to you. I look at Mr. Modi and I look at the kind of policies he has. Therefore, in my estimation, if I look at India's muscular approach to international politics, sometimes too muscular for my liking, I can believe that tit for tat is possible under Mr. Modi. So it's not far-fetched from my perspective, if I look at it objectively. But,
we'll know once the evidence arrives.
Yeah, if you accuse another government of doing something dirty, then you have an obligation to put the evidence on the table. The other question I have is this. My concern has been, and I've,
but the view goes both ways, and India is also concerned about Canadian intervention, especially in the state of Punjab, and another Canadian MP, Mr. Chandra Arya, he has also he belongs to the same party as Mr. Trudeau. And he said that, I can't understand how glorification of terrorism or a hate crime targeting a religious group is allowed in the name of freedom of speech and expression.
Well, I think that Well, I was going to make a point which is somewhat similar, because ultimately, freedom of expression is absolutely important. But if you value the ties with a fellow democracy, like India, it may be faulty. No democracy is perfect, and India is perhaps faultier than others. But if you think India is a friendly country, you say yes, freedom of expression. Any Canadian can say or demand anything, but the Prime Minister can say, we, as a government, don't support any efforts to dismember India. But nobody's ever said that, right? So freedom of expression, yes, but at least they can clearly state that they're not in favor of any efforts to dismember India. But nobody's ever done that.
I mean, the definition of democracy is going to vary because I'm sure there are problems even in Canada. But let's talk about
Of course
the
there
kind.
are.
Let's talk about Canada's leader of opposition, Pierre Poilievre, who's someone he's in fact been consistently hammering the Trudeau government for breaking down Canada with rising inflation, of course, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, including. He also came down heavily upon the Prime Minister after Prime Minister Trudeau returned from G20, where Poilievre also used the headline on the Toronto Sun page, which read, "This way out." And the description said, "Trudeau finds he has few friends at G20 summit in India." Is not the Canadian Prime Minister buckling under pressure at the moment?
Under political pressure, I think some suspect that there is a large
Why
element
not
of
economic pressure? You don't think that the
no,
economy is one of the factors as well?
oh, of course, the economy is a factor, housing is a factor, all of those issues are factors. So politically, he's facing strong headwinds, and therefore, there is some suggestion that the Prime Minister may have found this convenient to this statement that he made in the House about India, convenient to distract people from his real problems, if that's what you mean. Yeah, of course, there is some sense of that.
All right, then Mr. Dosanjh, Punjab's wanted gangster Sukhdev Singh Gill was shot dead by unidentified assailants on Wednesday. Rival gangsters Lawrence Bishnoi and Jaggu Bhagwanpuria have claimed responsibility for Sukhdul's killing in separate Facebook posts. What does it speak of the rising organized crime in Canada under Trudeau's administration and the Canadian police's inability to tackle or control crime?
Well, I think that the Khalistani elements and the gangs in Canada, there are some interconnections amongst them. It's amazing. It's ironic that India has no India has no movement for Khalistan in Punjab. I was in Punjab in May, just this last May, a couple of months ago. In my village, there wasn't a saffron turban to be seen. And it's a big village, and so it's ironic that you now have a burgeoning Khalistani movement in a country called Canada, along with Indian gangsters killing each other on Canadian soil, and that is, of course, that's a problem. Of course, that's a problem.
Right. Canada's main allies, including the United States and UK, have expressed concerns and called for investigations, but they have refrained from openly condemning India. What explains the muted response of Canada's allies?
Well, I think Canada's allies are India's allies at this moment in the international environment, and I think that they have to tread carefully. And I've noticed that, and I think Canada finds itself alone for several reasons. But the main reason is that Mr. Trudeau mishandled this issue from my perspective. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. I'm a citizen of Canada. If he says something, I take him at his word. But if the RCMP on one hand are circulating these mug shots that they have picked up from security cameras of the people that have allegedly killed Mr. Nijjar, and they're asking for people's help to identify those killers and the driver of the getaway car, while Mr. Trudeau saying he has credible evidence to suggest India has done it. If India has done it, give us the goods. Charge the people, unless you say these were Indian agents who flew into the country, did the dirty deed, and then flew out.
Fair enough. How can, I mean, of course, we'll know better when the investigation comes to a closure, but how can now India and Canada avert a repeat of a situation that we both have witnessed back in the 80s, where the divide between the Sikhs and the Hindus was disturbing and worrisome? And you've been someone who's witnessed the entire movement very closely throughout the 70s and 80s. I'd like your thoughts.
Well, I think that, as I said before, I mean, India doesn't trust Mr. Trudeau. But, Canada doesn't trust India either. Canada has some serious concerns in terms of foreign policy issues, although these are domestic issues for India. I think that there are legitimate concerns about Mr. Modi's inaction on the violence against the untouchables, and the Dalits and the Muslims and the Northeast. So internationally, if we say that Canada is turning into a bit of a pariah, even amongst its own allies, I think some of us see India's prime minister as not coming to the aid of its own people, in the sense that a prime minister has an obligation to say, people live in peace with love for each other. I have never heard Prime Minister Modi say that. So internationally, I think Mr. Modi has problems. Mr. Trudeau has problems. If you want to see better relationship between the two countries, I almost say that you have to sort of think past the two current regimes in both countries. These relationships, the relationship may not improve anytime soon.
And don't you think that the lackadaisical approach of the Trudeau administration also has had a role to play? Because we've had Indian diplomatic missions being vandalized. We've seen temples being vandalized. Indian diplomats have been threatened. There's the drug trade and the human trafficking gangs which are operating in the country that is also impacting the Indian state of Punjab directly.
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, the gangster activity that goes on, sort of with links in Punjab and links in Canada, is absolutely horrible. It's as if like Canada has become a battlefield for Punjab. And its gangsters, and we need to do more. There's absolutely no question. The RCMP needs to do more. We, as a country, need to do more. But these are issues that are ongoing. And but if you have hundreds of thousands of immigrants coming into the country every year, it kind of takes time to integrate them into the larger society.
Absolutely. There's a lot at stake, including thriving people-to-people ties. Here's hoping that India and Canada do find a way out through a meaningful and peaceful dialogue. On that note, I'm going to have to end this discussion. Many thanks to you, Mr. Dosanjh. It was a pleasure to have you here on CNN News 18. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
Good to have chatted with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dosanjh, before we end, I just wanted to ask you, is there any way that you can connect me with Mr. Harper's team, the former Canadian Prime Minister?
Do you know Shuv Majumdar, who's a new MP? He just got elected Member of Parliament for Canada. Majumdar.
Would you be able to share his contact with me?
I don't know whether he'd want me to share his. He's my friend. He just got elected. He's a conservative.
You can just give him a feedback of this interview, and based on that, we'll see how it goes forward.
I will speak to him and then pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. And will he be able to help me with Mr. Harper's team?
Well, he's very close to Mr. Harper. He just became a member of Parliament from Mr. Harper's old riding.
Please connect me, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dosanjh. It was lovely speaking to you.